everyone. How are you guys tonight? Okay, so tonight we were going to have Christopher Williams here to speak, but unfortunately his legal case has gotten so out of control he couldn't make it out here. We also had Kristen Floor wanting to attend tonight, but the same situation with her. She's just not able to make it down here. So speaking on their behalf, we have Kari Boiter. She is going to tell us their story, and it's just an amazing story and really worth listening to. This event is sponsored by the Sociology Department, McNair Scholars, A.B.L.E, Wildcats for Compassionate Care, the Center for Diversity and Social Justice, and the Center for
Leadership and Community Engagement.
Thank you. Center for Leadership and Community Engagement. They changed their names recently, so it got a little confusing. But I'd like to welcome Kari Boiter onto the stage and like to have her tell these amazing people's story.
Thank you, Reba, and thank you to Central Washington University for hosting me and being interested in learning more about what is going on. This case is taking place center stage in Montana, but it has implications for really every state in this country, particularly the 17 states in the District of Columbia, which currently allow the use of medical marijuana for terminally ill and disabled patients. Now, Chris Williams wanted to be here. He is actually set to go on trial on Monday. We really thought he was going to be getting a continuance. He was supposed to have a conference call with the judge today at 1 o'clock, and through some interesting legal maneuvers, that did not happen, and he is now going on trial on Monday. So one of the things that he's doing is he's on pretrial probation right now, and that means that he has to answer to a probation officer for everywhere that he goes, everything that he wants to do. The pretrial probation services officer has allowed him to travel up until this point, but this week, with as strange as things have gone, his pretrial services officer won't even deny his request to travel, but just won't return his calls. So I would say it's probably safe to say, in my opinion, that his right to free speech is being trampled at this moment. His right to freely travel is being trampled at this moment. His right to a trial is being trampled at this moment because he currently has counsel who is so ridiculously ill-prepared for trial that every attorney I talk to says he needs to fire him, and if the judge won't let him, he should represent himself. That's how bad his counsel is. I'm going to divert from Chris for a moment and go to Kristen Floor, which is a really emotional story. I may cry, so I apologize if that happens, but Kristen also wanted to be here. And the reason she can't be here is that her dad died in federal prison 3 weeks ago yesterday. She is waiting for his ashes to be sent to her in the U.S. Postal Service. So she's been waiting for 3 days now to try and pick it up from the post office, and she has not received her dad yet. And she doesn't feel comfortable leaving, knowing that her dad may end up at the post office at any minute. And that's her first chance to be with him again. So Kristen's family pretty much entirely has been wiped out by the federal government's war on medical marijuana. Her dad, Richard Floor, was a Vietnam veteran who proudly served his country. He was injured serving his country and serving the military. He was the very first registered caregiver for medical marijuana in the state of Montana. And as I mentioned, he died in federal prison 3 weeks ago today. A judge had said that he was incredibly sick, and there was medical prisons that could take care of him. He was supposed to go to one of those prisons when he was sentenced back in April. When he died on August 30th, he had never made it to a federal medical prison. He was en route to the federal medical prison after his attorneys and his daughter and his family members begging for him to get medical help for months. He broke 8 bones while he was waiting to be transferred to a medical prison. He suffered from colon cancer, which went undiagnosed. As he was being transferred, he had 2 massive heart attacks and kidney failure, and was put on life support in the hospital. As he lay there, flatlining twice, he remained shackled to his hospital bed. even as his daughter was making the decision to remove him from life support because that was the only way to free him from his own federal government, was to pull the plug. Even as that decision was being made, he lied, shackled to his hospital bed. Those shackles were not removed until 20 minutes after he left this earth. Now, Richard's wife, Sherry, is also in federal custody. She's in Phoenix, Arizona, serving 2 years for working for Richard's company. And Sherry's son and Kristen's brother, Justin, is also in a prison, serving 5 years for working for the company. Because they are federal prisoners, they are not allowed to have communication with other federal prisoners. So in the last 4 months of Richard's Floor's life, he was not able to communicate with his wife or his son, even by mail. They never approved the request. Luckily, Kristen was able to be there with him in his last moments, and her mother was able to call her on the phone, and she was able to put the phone up to her dad's ear so he could hear his wife of 37 years' voice for the first time in 4 months, just before he left this earth. He held Kristen's hand, and he squeezed it, and he moved his mouth. And we know that he knows his family was there. So how did we get to this point where we're locking up American citizens who are nonviolent and just trying to help sick people? Well, Richard Floor and his 3 business partners ran a company called Montana Cannabis. And I believe the reason they were targeted is that because they were in such strict compliance with state law that there was no way the state could bust them. They gave tours to local law enforcement, state lawmakers. They had the head narcotics officer for the state of Montana in their greenhouse on an almost weekly basis, counting their plants, looking at their inventory, watching their patients, and talking to them about strategies for keeping their medical marijuana out of the hands of recreational users and children. Tom Boiter was one of the partners, and Tom was a leading medical marijuana lobbyist in Helena, Montana. In fact, he is the person who worked to pass Montana's medical marijuana law. So he was a pretty big mover and shaker, somebody that the government probably doesn't really want to be out there furthering the cause. But he wasn't just trying to get marijuana for everyone. He wanted to implement a tightly regulated model because he really believes that this is great for patients, and he believed that if he did this tightly regulated model, the government might leave him alone. They might realize that we're just out to try and give sick people medicine. They actually operated a non-profit model. I've heard a lot of people say that they have problems with the medical marijuana industry because there's people making money hand over fist, millions at a time. Well, Montana Cannabis not only offered the highest quality and lowest price medicine in the state, they actually personally delivered their medicine to every region of the state, hundreds of miles away. The owners themselves drove it to these patients, and they did not charge them a dime to do so. Not gas money, nothing. They were committed to providing medicine to sick people at any cost, at a loss if it meant that. They were doing everything right, and they strived to maintain a professional, closely regulated business. Well, the government investigated them at a point, and in December of 2009, they said, hey, you know what? These guys really are doing everything right. Their Attorney General Holder said that we're not supposed to prosecute those in compliance with state law. And these guys are in compliance, so there's not much we can do. Well, something changed between then and March of 2011. It's hard to say what it is because if you ask Montana Cannabis partners, they didn't do anything different. But in March of 2011, heavily armed agents stormed 26 homes and businesses in Montana, and that included Montana Cannabis. In one day, the feds destroyed years of hard work and hundreds of sick patients' medicine. They arrested and indicted dozens of compassionate caregivers and even their employees. As a result, the terminally ill and disabled people of Montana have absolutely nowhere else to go but the underground black market. Every medical marijuana provider in Montana has been scared out of business because of these raids. They took away my friend Kristen's dad, they took away her mom, they took away her brother, they took away her dad's business partner, they took away her family's worldly possessions that had been in the family for generations, property that had been passed down for generations, heirlooms that had been passed down for generations, for complying with state law, for doing what the Attorney General of the United States told them they were well within their rights to do. So, we know that Kristen's dad is gone. He's become another martyr for this cause, and I really hope he didn't die in vain, and I hope that his story is what's going to get people to wake up and see how the government is treating its own citizens. Her mom, of course, remains locked up. She asked for a leave of absence to bury her husband, and they denied it. They said, well, there's got to be a funeral planned for you to go bury your husband. And she said, well, I need to plan the funeral with my daughter. She's been denied. She actually ran out of her phone minutes. She gets an allotted amount of minutes every month, and she can't use more than that. Well, because her husband died, and her daughter is grieving, and her son is grieving, and they're all grieving separately, and all they've been able to do is talk by a phone, those minutes are gone. So they're all now waiting for her minutes to renew just so they can actually grieve via phone together. So that's how the Floor family's constitutional rights have been violated. Let's talk about Chris Williams. Chris is one of the 4 partners. Every single one of them, except for Chris, has been pressured into pleading guilty, along with almost every other one of the people that was raided in March of 2011. Almost all of them want to go to trial. They don't really believe that a jury of their peers would convict them of providing medicine to sick patients. But their lawyers, the prosecutors, the judges, they all insist, if you do not take these plea bargains, you will go to jail and you will rot for the rest of your life. So far, Chris Williams is the only one who's been brave enough to say, okay, I'll rot for the rest of my life in prison. I'm not going to let them make me plead guilty to something I did not do. I'm not going to let them sentence me to prison for providing medicine to sick patients. So he's set to go to trial on Monday. He's been in constant contact with his pretrial probation officer, as we talked about earlier. But would you believe right now at this very moment, he's on the DEA's website as armed and dangerous, a most wanted fugitive. To this moment. I mentioned this at a protest yesterday in Seattle, right in front of the federal courthouse. I thought for sure somebody would be listening and they'd maybe pull him off that most wanted list. Nope, he's still armed and dangerous. Just tried to call his probation officer again today. In fact, it's his probation officer who won't call him back. As I talked about, his court-appointed attorney is incredibly ineffective and ill-prepared for trial next week. On Wednesday, his attorney told him he had 8 minutes to decide whether to take the government's final and best offer. That offer had been presented to him in writing just that morning, and just before his lawyer told him 8 minutes or you go to prison, he gave him 150 pages of pre-trial documents that he's been demanding for weeks and his lawyer has refused to give him. This isn't the prosecutor, this is his own lawyer. He wants to get rid of his lawyer, but do you know that the federal judge can say, no, you don't get to have another lawyer. You have to go on trial with this public defender that you believe is not representing your interests. We thought something would change today. He was supposed to have a conference call with the judge today at 1 o'clock. And he was going to tell the judge, I really don't want to go on trial on Monday with this lawyer I don't trust, who I don't think is doing the best for me. Turns out that they ended up having a conference call without him yesterday. And they said the reason why is because the media got a hold of it, and they were going to listen in on the conference call, and they weren't really comfortable with that. So they went ahead and had the conference call discussing Chris's future and his ability to go to trial, prepared or unprepared, without him, and made the decisions without the person who is most affected. They decided that his one and last defense that his attorney was going to introduce is not valid. And the judge said, we're going to have this trial wrapped up in a week. I want jury selection to take 1 day. Despite all the court documents saying it could take 3 to 4 days because of the media exposure, the judge has demanded that the jury selection will not take more than a day. And the judge says it's all going to be wrapped up within a week. Now, I'm not quite sure how a judge can know how a trial is going to go and how he can set the ramifications that way, but it sure seems like this is not the justice system that I grew up believing in. Now, the pressure that he's got from his attorney, as I talked about, his attorney says take the plea bargain. His alternative is you're going to be convicted at trial, you have no reasonable expectation for appeal, and you're going to rot in prison for the next 45 years away from your 16-year-old son. His 16-year-old son who did absolutely nothing wrong, nothing illegal. He is now suffering the cruel and unusual punishment of this federal government. So basically, what needs to happen now is all of you who are listening to me right now, you all need to stand up and realize that whether you're involved in medical marijuana or not, the government is not respecting the U.S. Constitution. And if you believe in the Constitution, you need to take notice of what they're doing. Right to speedy trial, right to fair counsel, right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure, they're violating it all. Our right to speak freely about the benefits of cannabis as medicine, our right to protect our family and property, our right to experiment on the state level with policies that have the overwhelming approval of voters. The federal government is stopping that from happening right now. You can choose to pass whatever measure you want on the ballot in November, and they can choose to come in and pass whatever laws they want and overturn that. So, I ask that you don't let anyone else die a torturous death in federal prison like Kristen's dad. And don't let the government lock up any more of its own citizens, especially when they are not violent and they're just trying to help sick people. We need to take a stand, we need to take a stand together, and we must refuse to back down. Thank you.
Thank you, Kari. That entire story comes from a family and business partners trying to help sick people, people dying from cancer, other diseases, and it's not right. The federal government is coming in and taking our rights. It's not just Montana. It happens here in Washington. There was over 20 dispensaries shut down in Seattle over the summer simply because they oppose a legalization initiative that's on the ballot in Washington. They oppose that initiative because it hurts the patients. This story is just another example of what it is to be a cannabis patient, what it is to be sick. I mean, we have patients who need their medication and can't get it because these providers are being thrown in prisons. And we all need to step up, take a stand, and end this. The federal government is encroaching on our rights, and we need to end it. They're not going to listen to 1 or 2 people. They're not going to listen to just a couple organizations. But if we get every person in this room, and you get every person you know, and they get every person they know to step up and speak out, the federal government will have to listen. And I would like to ask now if anyone has any questions, we can try and answer them. If anybody else has anything they'd like to add, go ahead, come up. You want to say something?
question I have is, I know that it's about states' rights and federal rights, and to me, I don't understand why a federal law could overcome a state right. I always thought the state rights would be protected in this country. Can you explain to me why Montana's states' rights are being violated? Or is there any way that they could get it so this is a state rights issue?
Well, actually, Montana and all of our states' rights are being violated. Everywhere where the Fed is trying to trump the will of the voters and stop the legislature from implementing the policies they believe are just. It happened here with SB 5073. A lot of people came together and worked really hard to pass a bill. The governor asked whether or not the feds would allow it, and they scared her into vetoing it. And the same thing happened in Montana. The day that these raids happened was the day that the legislature was considering a repeal of the medical marijuana program. And what do you know? They passed it after these raids. So it is a violation of the 10th Amendment, and the states do have the right to set these policies, and that was very clearly laid out in the Bill of Rights. So what's being done about it is Chris Williams and his partners filed a civil lawsuit. And it's in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals right now. The state of Montana just dismissed it, saying there was no cause. There's definitely cause, as we just talked about. So the civil attorney has referred it back up and asked the Ninth Circuit Court to look at the issue closer and either send it back to the Montana court and force them to rule or take it up themselves. That lawsuit is very closely related to the criminal action against Chris Williams, because if he takes a plea bargain, he has to agree to drop all civil action against the federal government. So this is another reason why he doesn't want to take that plea, even if he's being threatened with 45 years in prison for providing medicine to sick people. He doesn't want to take the plea because he has a case that would force the federal government to recognize that the states have the right to implement their own policies. So we're stuck here with this criminal juncture. I mean, if they convict Chris, he'll go to prison, and hopefully we can get him out on appeal, and we'll keep fighting on the civil grounds, and hopefully people in other states will file similar lawsuits for the exact same thing happening in their states. And that's the best we can hope for, because the state of Montana hasn't stood up to the federal government. The state of Washington hasn't stood up to the federal government. They're letting these agents come into their state and arrest people who are in compliance with their laws. They're not just allowing it, they're taking part in it actively. State agencies, local law enforcement agencies, they are assisting in these raids. And if the state and the local agencies said, no more, we're not using our resources to help you implement your crooked laws, it would stop. But the states won't stand up because they're scared too. I guess I don't know what else to do. I think this is the time that we all need to come together and we all need to say, no, we're not going to allow this to happen anymore. And every person who's been affected by this should look into filing suits for their rights being impinged. I don't know what else to do. I'm at a complete loss.
Thank you for the question. Thanks for the great answer, Kari. As we've seen tonight, there's just a lot of issues of our rights being violated. I mean, I know we've repeated it over and over tonight, but that's what we have to get people to realize is our civil rights as citizens of this country are being taken away from us because we are choosing to use the freedom given to us by our government and choosing our own medication. We're getting put in jail for that. And we just need to say no. Everyone needs to say no. And I would just like to say we send our thoughts out to Kristen and her family. And Kari, I think I can speak for most people here. Make sure Christopher Williams knows we support him, and we hope everything turns out for the best. I mean, there's not a lot you can do but just hope for the best and hope that we can get enough people to stand up and end this war on the patients and ultimately end the war on cannabis. Because in the end, that is the true issue. The war on cannabis is deadlier than the use of the plant itself, and that's what doesn't make sense the most out of all of this. We have alcohol legal. That kills people every day. Tobacco kills people every day. Cannabis has never killed a single person in history. Why is it illegal? That's what we need to end. And the last thing I would like to add is that we have a petition right here. Wildcats for Compassionate Care and A.B.L.E are sponsoring having it in here today. They're also sponsoring a voter registration drive. So if you want to sign the petition but aren't registered to vote, you can register to vote right there and then sign it right there. And I hope that hopefully in 2013 we can get an initiative and that's a good initiative and get it passed and just legalize it. And then what can the feds do? Because then the state has to be on our side. So I would like to thank you all for being here and thank you for your support. Please tell your friends to tell their friends. We need to get the word out and get people to stand up and say no in this. Thank you guys.